On December 11, 1941, 4 days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Adolf Hitler stood before the Reichstag and made a decision that stunned even his own leadership. Germany was not yet at war with the United States. American ships had escorted convoys, American industry supported Britain, and American rhetoric was increasingly hostile. But there was no formal state of war. Hitler did not have to act. No treaty required him to intervene. No immediate military threat forced his hand. Yet he chose escalation. In a speech filled with ideological fury and distorted facts, he declared war on the United States of America. The declaration was framed as inevitable, even defensive, but behind the words lay a deeper miscalculation. Hitler believed he understood America. He believed it was internally divided, racially fractured, politically unstable, and incapable of sustained sacrifice. These assumptions were not new. They had been cultivated for years through Nazi ideology and reinforced by selective intelligence reporting. To Hitler, the United States was a nation of material excess but moral weakness, rich but hollow. Declaring war was not a gamble in his mind. It was a confirmation of what he already believed the war had become. Inside the German leadership, the reaction was far from unanimous. Senior diplomats were alarmed. Naval planners understood immediately what this meant for the Atlantic. Economic officials warned that Germany was already stretched beyond sustainable limits. Even within the Wehrmacht, there was unease. Germany was fighting on multiple fronts. Its campaign against the Soviet Union had stalled short of a decisive victory, and Britain remained undefeated. Adding the world's largest industrial power to the list of enemies defied strategic logic. Yet dissent mattered little. Hitler had increasingly centralized decision-making around himself, and by late 1941, disagreement was interpreted as disloyalty. The declaration of war was the culmination of a longer pattern: ideology overriding caution, belief replacing analysis. What made this moment exceptional was not only its scale, but its permanence. Unlike earlier decisions, this one could not be reversed or mitigated. It locked Germany into a global war it was structurally unprepared to win. While the speech itself was greeted with applause inside the Reichstag, its consequences were immediate and far-reaching. In Washington, the declaration removed any remaining political barriers to full American mobilization against Germany. A conflict that had been edging toward inevitability was now formalized. From that moment on, the war ceased to be a primarily European struggle. It became a confrontation between a continent-bound power and an adversary whose strength lay in distance, production, and time, three factors Germany could neither control nor overcome. In the days before December 11, 1941, the German leadership was anything but unified about confronting the United States directly. While Adolf Hitler had long spoken of America as an eventual enemy, many within his government understood the danger of turning assumption into policy. The German Foreign Office warned that a formal declaration would eliminate any remaining diplomatic flexibility. Naval commanders, particularly within the Kriegsmarine, saw disaster looming. Germany's U-boat campaign in the Atlantic was already stretched thin, and a full American entry would mean not only more escorts, but vastly increased shipbuilding and anti-submarine capabilities. Economic planners delivered even darker assessments. Germany's war economy was operating at maximum strain, dependent on conquered territory, forced labor, and fragile supply chains. The United States, by contrast, possessed unmatched industrial depth and access to global resources. To fight Britain and the Soviet Union simultaneously was already a gamble. To add America was to guarantee a war of attrition Germany could not sustain. These concerns were not abstract. They were presented clearly, repeatedly, and ignored. Hitler dismissed them as short-sighted, insisting that American involvement was inevitable and that delay only strengthened the enemy. In his view, declaring war was an act of clarity rather than recklessness. What mattered was not capacity, but will, and he believed America lacked it. This belief stood in sharp contrast to the reality taking shape across the Atlantic. Since 1939, the United States had been transforming its economy at a pace unseen in history. Even before entering the war, American factories were producing aircraft, tanks, ships, and ammunition on a scale that dwarfed German output. Programs like Lend-Lease had already bound American industry to the survival of Britain, and increasingly, the Soviet Union. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had maneuvered the country steadily closer to open conflict, framing the war as a struggle not just for Europe, but for global order. Hitler either misunderstood or dismissed this trajectory. He interpreted American caution as weakness and political debate as paralysis. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Hitler saw confirmation of his worldview. The United States had been forced into war by surprise, not resolve. He believed American society would fracture under pressure, distracted by distance and divided priorities. This misreading proved fatal. In Washington, Germany's declaration of war achieved what Roosevelt himself had not yet fully secured: national unity against a single enemy. The declaration removed legal and political obstacles overnight. Within hours, the United States formally entered the European war with full public backing. What German planners had feared now became inevitable. American industry, manpower, and strategy were redirected toward defeating Germany as a primary objective. Hitler had not preempted American involvement. He had accelerated and legitimized it. By acting against all advice, he transformed a potential future adversary into an immediate mobilized enemy. The decision did not doom Germany instantly, but it defined the war's long-term balance. From that point forward, victory would depend not on battlefield brilliance or tactical daring, but on production, logistics, and time, domains in which Germany was fundamentally outmatched. The strategic consequences of Germany's declaration of war became visible almost immediately, particularly in the Atlantic. Until December 1941, the naval conflict between Germany and the United States had existed in a gray zone, undeclared, cautious, and politically sensitive. American destroyers escorted convoys, U-boats shadowed them, and incidents occurred without formal escalation. Hitler's declaration erased that ambiguity overnight. The Atlantic Ocean became a fully recognized battlefield, and the scale of the contest changed fundamentally. At first, German submarines experienced short-term success. American coastal defenses were unprepared, convoy systems were incomplete, and U-boats inflicted heavy losses along the U.S. eastern seaboard. But these early gains masked a deeper shift. The United States possessed shipyards capable of replacing losses faster than Germany could sink them. Escort carriers, long-range patrol aircraft, radar, and sonar were introduced at accelerating speed. Where Germany relied on experience and tactical ingenuity, America relied on iteration and volume. Each encounter generated data. Each loss prompted a technical response. The Battle of the Atlantic, once Germany's most promising strategic lever, began to tilt irreversibly. By 1943, U-boat losses would reach catastrophic levels, not because German crews lacked skill, but because they were facing an opponent whose learning curve was powered by industrial mass. Beyond the seas, the declaration reshaped the entire structure of the war. American entry meant that Germany was no longer fighting individual enemies with separate priorities, but a coordinated coalition whose resources were pooled and synchronized. American factories did not simply arm U.S. forces, they supplied Britain, the Soviet Union, and later the armies that would land in North Africa, Italy, and France. Aircraft production surged to levels Germany could neither match nor disrupt. Strategic bombing intensified, stretching German air defenses beyond their limits and forcing impossible choices between protecting cities, factories, and fronts. On land, the long-term implications were even starker. American manpower allowed the Allies to plan offensives not as gambles, but as processes. Losses could be absorbed, units rotated, and pressure maintained indefinitely. Germany, by contrast, was already consuming its reserves. The Eastern Front demanded constant reinforcements, the Mediterranean drained resources, and the home front suffered under bombing and shortages. Hitler's decision ensured that these pressures would only increase, never ease. By bringing the United States fully into the war, he guaranteed that Germany would face not just defeat on the battlefield, but exhaustion at every level: economic, military, and psychological. What had once been a war of maneuver became a war of systems, and Germany's system was fundamentally inferior. The declaration of December 11th did not trigger immediate collapse, but it removed any plausible path to victory. From that point on, Germany could still fight, still inflict damage, still delay defeat, but it could no longer shape the outcome. The war's direction had been set, and time itself had turned into an enemy Germany could not escape. By the time the full consequences of December 11th, 1941 became undeniable, Germany's strategic position had already hardened into something irreversible. The entry of the United States did not merely add another enemy, it redefined the nature of the war itself. Germany could still achieve local successes, launch offensives, and prolong resistance, but the underlying balance had shifted beyond recovery. American involvement meant that every German loss would be met not with scarcity, but with replacement. Every Allied setback would be studied, adjusted, and answered with greater force. The war ceased to be a contest of maneuver and became a contest of endurance, one measured in factories, fuel, shipyards, and airfields. In this contest, Germany was fatally disadvantaged. Even as Hitler demanded unwavering resistance and forbade strategic withdrawals, the reality was eroding beneath him. German cities were bombed with increasing intensity, transportation networks fractured, and trained manpower dwindled. The fronts multiplied, but the reserves did not. The declaration of war ensured that there would be no respite, no diplomatic exit, no strategic pause. Germany had committed itself to fighting an opponent whose greatest strength lay not in speed or surprise, but in the ability to sustain pressure indefinitely. The outcome was no longer a matter of if, but when. In retrospect, the declaration of war on the United States stands as one of the clearest examples of ideology overwhelming strategy. Adolf Hitler did not act out of necessity, nor under coercion, nor in response to an unavoidable threat. He acted because his worldview demanded it. He believed history favored the bold, that willpower outweighed material limits, and that enemies he despised could not endure hardship. These beliefs had shaped earlier decisions and had already cost Germany dearly. In December 1941, they crossed a final threshold. By formalizing conflict with the United States, Hitler eliminated the last remaining ambiguity that might have restrained American power. What followed was not immediate collapse, but systematic defeat. The war expanded, the coalition solidified, and Germany found itself locked into a struggle it could neither shorten nor escape. The decision did not fail because of poor execution. It failed because its premises were false. America did not fracture. It mobilized. It did not hesitate. It organized. And once engaged, it did not disengage. Declaring war against all advice did not demonstrate strength. It revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the modern world. From that moment forward, Germany was fighting time itself, and time was aligned against it. The declaration of December 11th did not end the war, but it ensured that its end would arrive on terms Germany could no longer influence.